Today's conversation is all about staying connected to what's happening in our city, from public safety to development and economic activity. We're fortunate to have two key leaders with us who help shape and support our community every day. We also have my co-host, Aisa Shori. She'll be monitoring the chat and reading out your questions, so please feel free to drop those in at any time. I'd like to start first by introducing Police Chief Paul Keith. Paul leads the Cerrito Police Department and is responsible for public safety services throughout our city. He brings decades of law enforcement experience and a strong commitment to community policing, transparency, and building trust. Under his leadership, the department has focused on proactive safety strategies, community engagement, and addressing the evolving needs of residents and businesses alike. Chief Keith, thank you for being here.
Thank you to Kevin and the rest of the chamber for having me. So I have notes for myself. I'm going to try to keep it to just 20-ish minutes. And we're gonna kind of go through a little slideshow as we go. So I'm going to share my screen and try to have this happen correctly. Perfect. All right, let's start off. So thanks again for having me here today. I figured we'd start off with just kind of some images of the high-tech things that El Cerrito used in the past. So here's a picture of probably one of our record specialists from the mid to late 50s, is my guess. If you see the picture, there's actually a map on the wall behind this guy. Now, to this day, city staffers still use this map as a map of El Cerrito. It's been updated a little bit. But it also gives you an idea of the development in the city. There's a lot of missing neighborhoods in the map that are present now. That same format of map, though, is used in a lot of city offices to this day. Here we got a detective and a police officer working on case. One thing you might notice is that detective's smoking a cigarette. That's certainly one thing we found in this building, that when you move into a new office, it takes some time to clean all of the old cigarette smoke off of like the fixtures in the offices. Now, this is a picture from our old police department, the police department that was demolished in about 1960. So here's a couple of our guys. Here we've got our modern police fleet, circa the late 50s. Got the old police department there in the background. El Cerrito, during his time as a police officer, they did incorporate a lot of modern technological innovations along the way. They had call boxes throughout the city to help officers respond to calls quickly. When police radios and cars became a reality, El Cerrito was one of the agencies that adopted that. Back in the 40s, they had a traffic unit. They had a three-wheeler motorcycle for doing parking violations. So along the way, that even though it was a small agency, they adopted a lot of the modern police practices. Things do change over time. We're no longer in this old building. We've got this brand new public safety building built in 1960. This is probably around when the building was created. Not a lot has changed in the building in the last 66 years, at least from the outside appearance. The city did cut a lot of these trees down, unfortunately, but otherwise the building remains pretty much the same as it was from the exterior back in the 60s. You can see on the hills behind the building, there's a lot of missing houses back in 1960. And here's the group. This is probably late 50s. Here's a group of officers. Now, some people think that when I was a young cop, that I look like this guy down in the lower right. My family's not really from El Cerrito, so I can't claim any kinship to him, but I do see maybe there's a little bit of a comparison there. He's also, I think, the only person actually smiling in the photo. So here's the group of cops. You can see some look disgruntled even back in the 50s, but we have about 30 cops pictured here. Some of them are kind of hiding behind other guys. So 30 sworn. Now, some things do change over time. So here's our most recent group photo of our police department from last spring. Something interesting to note, the old picture had about 30 cops. This one has 28 cops in it because staffing fluctuates over time. So at this little snapshot in time, we had about 29 sworn officers on the books. Since then, our staffing has improved quite a bit. Our new staffing number is we have 36 out of 37 sworn officer positions filled, and we have 8 out of 9 of our non-sworn positions filled. So we still have one more police officer to hire, and we have one record specialist to hire. But This picture also kind of demonstrates the expansion of support services in a police department, that modern police department really takes a lot of different people filling roles. Folks in the white shirts in the middle, those are our property evidence and record specialists. The gray shirts, those are our community service officers. They do parking enforcement and help with some police investigation. And the royal blue shirts, those are our police volunteers. So they fill a lot of roles in the police department and do it all on their own time. So I like to start my presentation proper off with our mission statement because it really drives a lot of the things that come after. So our mission statement is that we protect our community, we solve crime, and we pursue justice. We try to keep our mission statement short and to the point because we want it to serve as an easy reminder for our officers when they go out on their shift of what they should be focusing on while they're out there. So today I'm going to talk about some technology initiatives that the police department has undertaken, talk about some accomplishments and recent events. I'm also going to talk about crime trends, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about license plate readers because that's kind of the issue of the day at the police department. So to start off with, the police department has a number of technology initiatives that we engage in. We have a license plate reader system. Now our system includes both static cameras. We have 40 cameras on stationary poles around town. And it's also vehicle-based. The vehicle-based part of the system is our police cars have license plate reader systems built into them. And our parking enforcement vehicles have license plate reader systems built in so that they can do parking enforcement at time zones. Now, the way license plate reader systems work is they're basically a two-function system. They're an early warning system, and they're also an investigative aid in the aftermath of a crime. As an early warning system, when a camera detects a vehicle passing by it that's on a state hot list, like it's a stolen vehicle or perhaps it's a vehicle wanted in connection with a robbery, it sends an alert to officers letting them know the location, the direction, the time that the vehicle was seen. Usually from our static system, these alerts hit officers within 1 minute of a vehicle passing by the location. Now, for our vehicle-based systems, that alert is almost instantaneous when it spots a vehicle. The officer driving the car will get an alert on their screen that the vehicle just detected a wanted vehicle. Now, as an investigative aid, we use the system in the aftermath of a crime to try to develop information about the person responsible for the crime. So let's say that we had a shoplifting incident occur and the suspects fled to the parking lot and left the scene in a vehicle. Now, if somebody saw the vehicle, maybe they saw the license plate of the vehicle, we can enter that license plate into our system and see if we can find matching vehicles. From there, we can develop information about the person who was in the car on that day and that time, and see if we can identify a person responsible for the crime. However, the license plate reading system is also more sophisticated than that. So even if somebody didn't see the license plate, if they were able to identify characteristics about the car, like the make of the car, the color of the car, the model, maybe the model year range of the car, we can also enter that into the system and start coming up with potential vehicles that might match that car. All of these are to help our officers get investigative leads to hopefully help them identify the person responsible for the crime down the road. Now, just because your vehicle matches the description of a vehicle used in a crime doesn't mean that you automatically getting arrested and charged with a crime. There's a lot of other information that detectives have to put together that actually connect a person with an actual crime. There's eyewitnesses to talk to, there's photo lineups to do, so there's a lot of other steps involved. Now we have some other aids that are primarily for our investigators. So our investigators have a pretty comprehensive suite of cell phone forensic tools. They have tools that help them access evidence that might be in a suspect's phone. Oh yeah, there's my screensaver. We also have some analytic software that lets us kind of visualize elements of the phone. So as an example, we had a homicide case at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025. And a big part of that case was where the suspect traveled, sorry, it's 23 and 24, where the suspect traveled both before and after murdering the victim in the case. So our analytics software was essentially able to create a live action map that tracked the location of the suspect's cell phone as he traveled to the victim's residence, as he left the victim's residence after committing the homicide, and as he kind of scouted out places where he might dispose of the victim's body. This software helps us paint a picture of a suspect's movements both before and after a crime. Our investigators also have a facial recognition software suite that they use. The developer is Clearview AI. So what this allows them to do is allows them to take a photograph of a suspect, maybe a surveillance image. It could be a cell phone picture someone took of a suspect, and do a search of a few billion publicly available photographs to see if we get an investigative lead as to who that person might have been. Now, once again, just because there's a possible subject developed in the software, it doesn't mean investigators can just automatically go and arrest the person. There's a lot of other connecting evidence that they need before they have enough to get a warrant. So they have to be able to establish, is this person even in our area? A lot of the hits that we've gotten recently in cases involve suspects with matching records that are outside of the state of California. However, it ended up being the suspects, and I'll talk about that in the next series of cases because we were able to link them back to our area at the time, combined with the eyewitness matches of their eyewitnesses identifying them as a suspect. So I'll talk a little bit about more on that when we talk about actual cases. On the patrol side, our officers have an AI-assisted report writing program. Basically, what this program does is it uses body-worn camera footage and it creates a draft police reports for officers to start their narrative with. The idea behind this is that some of our officers take quite a while to write a police report. We're trying to cut down on the amount of time it takes officers to get that first draft down, to give them more time on the street, and to also reduce overtime that the department and city incurs when a call happens late in the day. So when a call happens late in the day, an officer has to write the report. Sometimes that means they stay on an hour, 2 or 3 hours after their shift on overtime trying to write these reports. So we're trying to tighten up that cycle, get them available more quickly, and then cut down on the costs of the city. So far, it's been fairly hopeful process. The technology is relatively new. If any of you have used things like ChatGPT or Gemini, it can be very helpful, but you have to absolutely double and triple check anything that AI gives you. So that is part of the process. Our patrol officers have e-bikes available to them. So we have 2 e-bikes that we purchased last year. We've had a few deployments of them, some successful apprehensions of suspects. We got a guy with a whole bunch of meth and a gun one night while we were doing bike patrol for copper thieves on our Ohlone Greenway. We have drones that our patrol officers use. So our officers use them to help search for subjects, whether they're missing subjects or people that are trying to evade police capture. We use it a lot for aerial photography. So back in the day, if we wanted to take a picture of a crime scene from up above, we would literally have to get like a really big ladder to take the picture. Or we'd have to get a police helicopter in to give us a big overhead shot of our scene. Back when I was a detective, like we would find a big ladder from the fire department and set it up to try to take an overhead shot. Well, drones allow us to just put a drone up in the air, take high definition photographs of crime scenes. It really helps paint the picture for things like vehicle collisions without having a cop balancing around on a big ladder. It's funny, the low-tech solutions to some of the problems that police officers face. So I also want to talk about some recent highlights and accomplishments. So we had some significant cases in 2025. We had a sexual assault on the Ohlone Greenway. That one was kind of solved with a combination of good old-fashioned police work as well as DNA. So we ended up making an arrest on a subject about a month after the assault. And our investigators recognized that this guy has a lot of matching characteristics to the suspect from the sexual assault. We ended up getting a DNA warrant for the person and ended up that their DNA matched the matched DNA found on the victim from the sexual assault. So it was a challenging case to bring together because we didn't have a lot of leads to work on. But luckily for us, the suspect remained active in our area and continued to commit different types of crimes. And we were able to put the pieces together to link him to the sexual assault. We also had a home invasion robbery last year. This was a case that was solved really with the help of our license plate reader cameras. We had a couple that was woken up at about 11:50 at night to guns in their face and 2 suspects saying, "Where's all your valuables?" Suspects robbed them of a bunch of their personal property, fled the scene that night. They called the police after the suspects left. Fortunately, they'd already eluded capture that night. So our police officers did a very comprehensive search for video surveillance footage that evening from the neighborhood. I continued on into the following morning. We were able to develop a suspect vehicle and get a license plate. Then, using our license plate reader cameras, we were able to track the vehicle down to where it was last seen exiting the freeway in Dixon, California. Our detectives drove to Dixon that day and started searching streets for the vehicle. They went to the last place the vehicle had been seen on a license plate reading camera, and then they just started a grid search to see if they could locate the vehicle. And after they went, I think about 10 blocks, they found the vehicle parked in front of an apartment complex. One of the suspects was asleep inside. They were able to apprehend him within 24 hours of the crime occurring because we were able to not only use license plate readers to get vehicle description data, but we were able to also locate the suspect because we have a shared agreement with Dixon that they look at our video and we are able to, sorry, they look at our photographs, we're able to look at their photographs. We had three different successes with facial recognition that I thought were worth talking about. We had a burglary on Potrero where a suspect's face was captured on surveillance footage. We were able to match that face. That face came back with a match on a newspaper article out of the state of Maine. When our detectives read the article, it said, "Hey, our officers arrested this guy on a warrant out of Richmond, California for burglary." So we were able to say, oh, well, actually, that guy's actually from Richmond. We were able to find some witnesses that could personally identify him. They were able to help identify him for us. And I think he currently has a warrant for his arrest. We had a hate crime at our Chevron station where we really didn't have much to go off of other than surveillance footage shot from the gas station. In that event, the suspect used a racial epithet against the clerk, broke his nose by assaulting him. We were able to use that photo. We ended up matching it to a person out of the state of, it was either North or South Carolina. First, we thought, well, for sure that's not him. How would it be him? And then we found that he had actually been contacted very recently, within I think about a week of the crime, by the San Francisco police, meaning that he was actually in our area. So we ended up putting together a photo lineup. The victim in that case identified him as the suspect, and he was arrested and charged with the hate crime. Well, he's charged with the assault. They didn't charge the hate crime, unfortunately. And then we had an arson case where this guy, kind of a similar story. Person burnt down the former mayor's car in San Pablo. They came by looking for help with the investigation. We put it through Clearview AI and found a match for an arsonist out of Modesto, as it turned out. Apparently, this person was just working their way through it's kind of transient, working their way through the Bay Area, lighting fires here and there. And one of the cars that he happened to burn down was a former mayor's car in San Pablo. So we were able to help them clear that case too. Last year, we also had an incident involving an assault of one of our officers with a vehicle. And I put this in here because it highlights that officers do face challenging and dangerous calls from time to time. It's not necessarily common for our officers to be assaulted. It's uncommon, but it is a kind of persistent danger of the job. In this case, one of our sergeants was responding to a theft incident at Ross. As he arrived, was exiting his car, the suspect drove at him and basically ran him over, knocked him to the ground, put him out on an injury. We were able to put the pieces together of the case, figure out who the suspect was, ultimately bring him into custody. And our sergeant recovered, had a full recovery, which is great. But the job is dangerous from time to time, and I think it's important to remind people of that. All right, on the traffic safety front, last year was our first full year of having a traffic officer deployed. It meant that we went from writing about 2,200 tickets in 2024 to writing 3,400 tickets in 2025. And that increase is almost entirely from the output from that traffic officer. He worked on speeding violations, right-of-way violations, things like stop signs and traffic lights all over town. Was a very productive officer. He also helped assist in investigation of two fatal collisions that we had within the last 6 months or so. But a fatal collision on San Pablo Avenue at Waldo that happened during the afternoon on a Saturday. Driver drove over a pedestrian in the crosswalk. That driver was ultimately charged with vehicular manslaughter. We had another fatal collision where two people were going to work early in the morning on East Shore. One person was walking, the other person was driving. The pedestrian stepped into the street in front of an oncoming car and unfortunately was struck and killed. In that case, all indications are that it was an accident, a very unfortunate accident. But in both of those cases, having skilled investigators really helped pay off to paint the picture of what happened. Officers were also very productive in 2025 in the realm of DUI enforcement. We had a 33% increase in DUIs. Went from arresting about 66 people in 2024 to 88 people in 2025, and our officers are already on pace this year to probably increase that by another 33%. As it turns out, there's still a lot of drunk drivers out there, inexplicably, despite the availability of things like rideshare services and transit, they still go out and drive drunk. So our officers take that enforcement very seriously. So I want to share a couple of crime trends. So I call these static crime trends because it's hard to really identify a direction that these crimes might be moving. So assaults kind of average around 150 or so assaults a year. On shoplifting, you can see that we had kind of a dip in shoplifting in 23 and 24 with kind of a bump up in 2025. Um, it's just data. Shoplifting continues to be a challenge that we face, especially for our merchants. And it's something that we're continually working on with our merchants to try to make an impact on it. And I'm going to come back to these in a second and talk about why I put these up here. I would consider these declining crime trends over the last 4 years. So these represent the crimes of robbery, burglary, and vehicle theft. And I chose the years because 2022 was the last year before we installed license plate reading cameras in El Cerrito. We installed them about halfway through 2023. So since we installed license plate reading cameras, we have seen significant decreases in total crimes for vehicle theft, burglary, and robbery. They've been significant enough that vehicle theft and burglary are at their lowest rates that they've been in 40 years. And that's as far back as the state data goes on their open justice portal. Robbery is the second lowest it's been in 40 years. And El Cerrito used to be a hopping place in the 80s, by the way, when you look at the data. But these are significant, historically significant reductions in each of these crimes. Uh, I don't think that it's just coincidental that we put license plate readers in 2023 and that now we're looking at these types of outcomes. Now, there are other agencies as well that are seeing decreases in these crime categories and crime overall. And one of the things that I think is interesting that it kind of correlates with across the state is that there are hundreds of agencies in California now that have license plate reading systems. In fact, our license plate reading system shares data with 318 agencies, and something like 280 agencies share data with us. And I think there's a little over 400 cities in California. So, somewhere around 75% of the cities in California at this point probably have a license plate reading system. So the fact that crime is going down at the same time as cities are implementing these very effective tools, to me, I don't think is random. The other thing I'd point out about these particular crime categories is each of these crime categories, robbery, burglary, and vehicle theft, tend to involve vehicles. In robberies, they need a getaway car. In burglaries, they need a vehicle to haul away all the things they just stole from someone's house. Vehicle theft is kind of self-evident. You need a car, you need either the car you stole or the car you used to get to the car you stole. Crimes of assault and shoplifting, however, don't necessarily involve a car. A lot of our assaults are domestic violence incidents, or they're two people who came across each other on the street, and the two wrong people met at the wrong time, and they end up fighting with one another. Shoplifting, by the same token, we have our shoplifting incidents tend to be around our shopping districts that also happen to be close to mass transit stations. So some shoplifters come through mass transit, some walk. Some ride bikes there, and some do drive vehicles during shoplifting, but I'd say it's more of a mixture than these three crime types. These three crime types almost inevitably involve vehicles. Now, during that same time frame, we've also had significant increases in the effectiveness of our officers and investigators. In 2022, our clearance rates, frankly, they weren't great. They were below state and county averages. 2025, which is our data from last year, we're at or above the state and regional average in clearance rates for the categories of robbery, assault, burglary, and larceny. We've had significant increases in our clearance rates during that period since we had license plate reading cameras. This clearance rate increase, it does correlate to having more police officers, but it also correlates to having our officers being much more effective in identifying suspects in the aftermath of a crime. Just to kind of give you some license plate reader statistics as they relate to cases, we have a box that our officers check whenever they use license plate reader on a case. Now, the problem with having a checkbox is the officers have to make sure they check it in order for us to be able to track it. So I can tell you how many cases at least were assisted by license plate readers and how many arrests at least were assisted with license plate readers. So at least 64 of our arrests over that 3-year period were helped with license plate reader cameras, where either the suspect was identified in part because of license plate reader cameras, or they played some role in the investigation. And license plate reader cameras also were used in at least 324 criminal investigations during that same time. So the use of these devices undoubtedly has led to increases in our clearance rate because they just frankly help us identify people a lot more effectively than just kind of guessing at cars. They provide, actual data that our officers can work with. There's photographs, it's places and times. It's at least an idea of who might be responsible through the registered owner of the vehicle. All right, and here's just a little intermediate picture. I just like to see pictures of police officers at work. Here's a couple of our officers writing a ticket to somebody for a traffic safety violation. I know we have some El Cerrito, Richmond Annex walkers and rollers on the call, so I put that in there for you. So I want to talk a bit about license plate reader cameras. So license plate reader cameras are kind of the big thing in the news right now. There's cities that are evaluating whether or not they should continue to have this tool. And I know I'm coming up to the end of my time, so I'm going to try to wrap it up. In El Cerrito, I think undoubtedly they have been a very important tool. They have become kind of the minimum standard for an effective agency right now. El Cerrito has them. We have kind of a technology package that puts us probably in about the middle of the pack for most agencies. There's agencies that have much more available to them, and there's some agencies that have hardly anything available to them. But we're kind of in the middle of the pack. Our officers make really good use of license plate readers to make themselves more effective in solving crime. Part of our mission statement. One of the big controversy with license plate reader cameras is that some agencies have found that there's been federal access to their systems. So to give you kind of a comparison of where El Cerrito is to other cities, there's cities like Richmond and Mountain View that once those cities had control of their cameras, they didn't really understand how the settings worked, and they ended up sharing with thousands of federal agencies inadvertently. In El Cerrito, we did understand how the settings worked, and we had two sharing incidents with agencies that we didn't intend to. There were federal agencies. We had a short period of time, about a month and a half period, where the United States Postal Service had access to our system through basically unintended setting that our vendor, Flock Safety, had allowed. They ended up correcting that back in 2023. And then we had one incident last year where the Veterans Affairs Police Department for the Loma Linda Healthcare Systems managed to do 2 different searches in our system. That was in May of 2025. And we think that the reason for that is that when they were first entered into the system, they weren't identified as a federal agency, so that allowed them some access to California agencies. Since then, our vendor has corrected those things. I mean, we physically can't change any settings in the system to allow us to share with any out-of-state agencies. Like there's a button for it and it's just grayed out. Like we don't have any access to change anything. Like we can't share with federal agencies even if we wanted to now. The system doesn't allow it. I think they've made tremendous gains in locking down California's system. And California is different than other states. There's some states that there's no regulations about who they share with. In California agencies are not allowed to share with out-of-state or federal agencies. So in El Cerrito, we had 2 different federal agencies that had access to our data. In Richmond and Mountain View, they had literally thousands of agencies that had access to their data. So there's a lot of community concern over, particularly Mountain View and Richmond, those agencies, and the agencies that had rampant federal sharing. In El Cerrito, that concern has kind of spilled over into our city as well. So we presented a renewal of our existing Flock contract to our council last week. We have a new proposed agreement from Flock. They had an existing agreement that they could renew. They elected not to make a decision. They're going to take up the decision at the next council meeting. That's May 5th. And I'll tell you, for anybody listening, I would say that it's kind of a toss-up whether or not our council votes to end our license plate reader system or to continue it. I think it could probably go either way, judging from the reactions of our council members last week. So for those listening on the call or those watching the recording, if you agree with me and you think that license plate readers are a useful tool and you want to see them continued, I I strongly encourage you to let your voice be heard with your council members. You can send emails to the city clerk for public comment for next week. Likewise, if you disagree that license plate readers are a good tool and you think that they should be ended, I think you should have your voice heard as well. So I think anyone, regardless of your opinion on the matter, should take advantage of the next meeting to let council know how you feel about the system and how you feel about its continued use. Me, I am a little biased because I have seen the effectiveness and I know how tremendous the system has been for bringing justice to some of our victims. I think one of the most impactful cases that I saw the camera use was in July of 2024. We had a hit and run case happened over by Burger King at the south end of town. A person was walking across the street, got hit by a driver. The only evidence we had to work with the crime was a blurry side view of the truck from a business's surveillance camera. It was a truck. That's all we knew. And we got it from a business surveillance camera. It was nothing that we could work off of. We couldn't even put it out to the media and hope that anybody could identify it. It was that blurry. We could just tell it was a pickup truck. But because we had license plate reader cameras, we were able to search the cameras for pickup trucks that passed by. We ended up getting a suspect vehicle from our license plate reader cameras. Within 48 hours, we had located that vehicle in the city of Concord because the truck passed one of their license plate reading cameras. When our detectives started doing the grid search to try to find it, they ended up finding the truck parked on the road. It still had evidence from the collision on the front of the truck. The guy hadn't even washed it. The registered owner was laying on the grass next to it, eating lunch. We were able to take him into custody, recover the truck. Through interrogating him, we were able to learn the identity of the driver that night. Sounds like it was probably a case of a DUI collision where they decided not to stop. We ended up apprehending the suspect and got charges filed for vehicular manslaughter on him. That 100% would not have been solved without license plate reader cameras. We would just been in fatal hit and run that was forever unsolved. I will leave you with that as my pitch on license plate reader cameras. And I know that we had other things to cover too, and I tried to cover a lot in my limited time. I'm a big talker, so I'm surprised I managed to keep it somewhere near 20 minutes. That said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if I can address some of the questions in chat.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, we'd love to take a few questions from
Did
the
people
group
did people
before we move
protest the
on.
radios back then? I like that.
Um,
I have no idea.
so, Aisa, what are you seeing in the chat?
So the next question that we have from one of our business owners, the city has for a long time now had an ordinance requiring merchants to have surveillance systems that hold 30 days or 30 days of recorded footage. How well has that program worked? I know you just spoke a little bit about that, but if you could just maybe elaborate.
Well, when we started the program, I would say that surveillance systems were not very common. And so the reason for the ordinance was to try to jumpstart that in the wake of a homicide that we had and to get wider spread use of surveillance systems amongst businesses that had kind of like a high risk of being robbed, like restaurants and shops. So when it was first made, I think it was very effective in kind of getting a widespread adoption of videos, business video surveillance across the city. Since then, we really haven't been enforcing or updating the system. From my experience with it, businesses are much more likely to voluntarily have video surveillance systems because the cost has come down so remarkably and storage is so cheap and even the cameras are so cheap. That we really haven't seen the need to kind of go back to the ordinance and modernize it and start enforcing again. I think that businesses do a really good job now of complying with the intent of the law.
All right, our next question. For license plate readers, how long is this data stored and who has access to the data? Also, are warrants needed to run cell phone forensics on someone's phone?
Okay, so first for license plate readers, the data is stored for 30 days and then is automatically deleted. When it comes to access to the data, obviously internally, our officers and investigators have access to our own data. We also share with agencies across California, and most of them share back with us to make all of us more effective in the aftermath of a crime. In El Cerrito, a lot of our crimes, we end up using the system to track down the suspects because they're seen on a license plate reader in a neighboring city. So Having a system where agencies share access to the data allows those things to happen. Yes, warrants are needed to run cell phone forensics on someone's phone. So if we see someone's phone, and I will say, with the exception of the very rare situation where somebody signs a form and says, yes, you can search my phone, a warrant's needed. So if somebody willingly tells us, yeah, you can search my phone, we don't need a warrant. But for the most part, yeah, we need warrants to do any kind of forensics. And that includes both of those different tools that I talked about, whether we're getting data off the phone itself or whether we're talking to a cell phone carrier to get location data. Both of those require warrants.
The next one's just a comment that they're happy to see the bike patrols added back,
Me
especially
too.
for the inaccessible spaces on the Greenway. Another thank you to your team for implementing current tech to fight crime. But we do have another question. This particular member of the public would like to know your thoughts on speed enforcement cameras and whether you would support those in El Cerrito.
So right now there's a pilot program going on for speed enforcement cameras. I think they're allowed in 5 or 6 cities in California. They're in the Bay Area, it's San Jose, Oakland, and San Francisco. It's basically a 5-year pilot where they're going to study the impact of the cameras, see if they have an impact on reducing speeds in the areas those cameras are set up. I am very interested to see how effective they are. And if they are effective, then I could imagine some places in El Cerrito where they might be helpful, particularly San Pablo Avenue, where we get higher speeds. One of the interesting things about the legislation is that the police department are not actually allowed to have anything to do with speed enforcement cameras. So it's public work has to be controlled by basically Department of Public Works. So ultimately, if the law remains the same with those same restrictions, I would actually have nothing to do with speed enforcement cameras. So it's just kind of an interesting quirk of the law.
There's another question regarding sharing information for criminals that cross state borders.
Yeah, the current California law was kind of created back in, I think it was about 2016, and I think that it was in response to concerns about California license plate reader data being used for immigration purposes. So that is kind of why it's just restricted to California. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't work on apprehending criminals across state borders. Typically, we would work with a federal agency to declare them like a fugitive from justice. And so, especially if it's a serious crime, we might get help from the FBI or the U.S. Marshals. But it wouldn't be a matter of us sharing data or access to our system over state lines. But in one of those cases that or actually, it's one of those cases with license plate reader cameras, we had this guy get followed home. Suspect comes up to him with a gun, robs him of his Rolex watch. The guy, helpfully, the suspect ends up dropping his wallet during the robbery, and then leaves in like a Dodge Charger, and we were able to get the license plate of the Dodge Charger too. So with those two pieces behind, I think even the cops from the 50s could have figured this one out. But we ended up identifying the suspect because the wallet he dropped was in fact his own wallet. We ended up getting the vehicle description, helped us actually connect him to a series of robberies through the Bay Area because we had the same vehicle get used, I think, in Danville, I think another one in Orinda, and another one in Oakland. So we kind of combined all these cases together in a big investigation. That guy's actually in custody, I think, in Florida right now because he did some robberies in Florida. So he's pending extradition back to California at the conclusion of his cases in Florida. So we can apprehend people over state borders. It's just a more complex process.
Okay, and then this will be the last one before we turn it over to Melanie. Can license plate readers read motorcycle, scooter, or e-moto plates? How can they be used for parking enforcement? And then maybe if you can kind of quickly touch on whether speeding is getting worse or better since the pandemic.
So yes, the license plate readers can read anything that is a license plate, whether they're temporary dealer plates or a plate issued by the state of California. In parking enforcement, the way they're used is our parking enforcement vehicles have cameras on them. As they drive by parked vehicles in time zones, they log the plate and they log the time that the vehicle was seen. And then a second camera takes a picture of the tire stem on the tire. So when the vehicle comes back around, maybe let's say 5 hours later for a 4-hour time zone, when it comes back around 5 hours later, if the system recognizes the car's there, it'll take another picture of the location and then it'll alert the operator of the car, hey, this car's been here for 5 hours. And then our parking enforcement officer can look at the pictures and say, okay, the valve stem hasn't moved from either picture. So the car hasn't left and then come back. The car is in the exact same place it was before, and then they can write a ticket. We can also put in settings for abandoned vehicles. So we can set a threshold. Maybe we might set something like a week. The car has been parked in the same location for a week. Our officer would look at it and consider marking it as abandoned vehicles. When it comes to abandoned vehicle enforcement, abandoned vehicles in town can be kind of an environmental problem from like leaking fluids when people just, leave a car around. And our officers don't always pick up on it. We usually rely on residents to report things like abandoned cars, but it's something that can be used for that as well. So we can pick up on, cars that are just kind of taking up space. Post-pandemic, is speeding getting worse or better in El Cerrito? I would say directly after the pandemic, it was a speeding disaster around here. I feel, and some of this is kind of just my impression, is the speeding has gotten a little bit better since that initial post-pandemic period. But there's certainly a lot of driving behaviors that have degraded since the pandemic. I don't know how people lost a lot, in my opinion, people lost a lot of driving skills in about the year period when things were shut down. So I don't know. I think we could probably take a survey. Is it better or is it worse? Probably all think it's worse than before the pandemic. All right. I know Melanie has some stuff
All
too,
right.
so I don't want to occupy more of her time. So, my contact
Thank-
information is on the end of the slide. I'll share the slide with Aisia so she can share that with the chamber. Of course, it's going to be on the web too, but my email address is on our website. It's pkeith@elcerrito.gov. My phone number is 510-215-4425. If you have any follow-up questions, anything I put on there, or want to share some thoughts, feel free to reach out to me at either of those, or stop by the lobby and I'll say hi and maybe we'll drink a cup of coffee and talk about whatever it is.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. Yeah, next, I'm pleased to introduce Melanie Mintz. Melanie serves as the Community Development Director for the City of El Cerrito, where she oversees planning, housing, economic development, and building services. Her work plays a major role in shaping how El Cerrito grows, supporting local businesses, guiding development projects, and helping ensure that our city remains vibrant and welcoming. Melanie brings a strong background in urban planning and community-focused development, and she's been instrumental in advancing initiatives that balance growth with the character of our community. Melanie, thank you so much for being here. Over to you.
Thank you all for having me. As I'm moving along, I do just want to share that I hear often from some of our, from many of our businesses, how important PD's response is. And in the past, we've posted at the Regency, the police and Plaza shopping center owners. We know when Taco Bell recently located, they at their grand opening shared how how El Cerrito has really turned around. So I just want to kind of give police a shout out for helping to create an environment where businesses can thrive. So obviously there's a lot of different ways to talk about economic development. So I'll try to go pretty quickly so that I can have time for your questions and answers. A lot of times people just want to know very specific things that are happening in a specific spot. We are focusing on San Pablo Avenue at the moment, not at our wonderful Upper Stockton or Upper Fairmont. Partly, I think probably 99% of our sales tax probably comes from San Pablo Avenue. It is an incredibly primary commercial corridor in our neighborhoods. Upper Stockton and Upper Fairmont are we at another time we could talk about some of those, and a lot of it is overlap, but I am focusing on San Pablo Avenue. When I first started here, we talked about San Pablo Avenue when we were doing some of our streetscape improvements as the entire city's front door, right? It's not just an entrance through one spot, but of course it runs the length of town. So what is economic development in El Cerrito? And I think economic development in every town means something different. Budget's such a big issue for the city that we can't ignore that it is, it's one of the major, most important pieces of our budget. And so we look to have, and we do have a pretty balanced and resilient economic environment and goals where we want to strengthen both sales tax, but property tax plays a huge role. I'm not getting too much into the city's budget or tax situation, but I think inviting Claire to one of the luncheons, our budget manager to one of the luncheons might be really interesting. So our goals are to attract investment and reinvestment, to support local businesses. And then our businesses do support both local and sub-regional needs, right? So we're not Emeryville, we're not at a major crossroads, we're not Walnut Creek at a major crossroads, but we do increasingly want to support quality of life and local needs, as well as sub-regional needs like Honda's obviously here and Trader Joe's and others who are not just serving El Cerrito residents. But repeatedly from the time that the pictures that Paul was showing, we've been considered a city of homes. And each time we do look at it, that is our strongest base, is that we are homes. And when we looked even at San Pablo Avenue, after we looked at it over the years, it repeatedly says that increasing to build homes on San Pablo Avenue will support our overall economic development goals, both by creating more customers, more business owners, and increasing the property values, as well as supporting the city's climate action goals, which is putting more people near transit. So we have taken to our corridor strategy on San Pablo Avenue as our primary economic spine. It's an interesting place. Like when I go to conferences and we talk about revitalizing downtowns and they show Healdsburg Square or, a downtown that was a downtown, ours was a corridor. And many of our grandparents, drove from Oakland to Sacramento along here. And there were motels and gas stations and across the county line type of businesses. So recreating something on the corridor is it's a pretty gradual process. And I think we have to be flexible. And I think we're seeing a lot of gradual transformation. And in terms of quality of life, really wanting to create San Pablo Avenue as a place where people want to be and come. I don't know about you all, but this is appetizing. And I know it's lunchtime, so hopefully you have something. I was going to play a game with both food and places, but don't have the time where you could see like who knows who's been. Does everybody feel like they've been to these places? Does everybody recognize most? I see. Does everybody feel like they know all of them or have questions? But you can see it's actually, in the time I've been here, and I've heard many people say this, the diversity of our restaurant offerings is pretty outstanding. I should share, when Paul was introducing himself, both Paul and I live here. So just kind of a characteristic of both of us. So we not only want to see these businesses thrive in our professional capacity, but also in our personal capacity. So San Pablo Avenue is a mixed-use commercial. There was a time that we required commercial everywhere, ground floor commercial, and people were like, "You have way more square footage of commercial than a sub-regional market can handle. It will not do well." And housing is really, and this was of course pre-pandemic, that's your engine. So we did, as people know, changed our zoning to allow more housing, to not require ground floors everywhere, to try to focus it in nodes, but still allow it wherever it happens to be. And to be flexible because the market changes, as we know, and we can talk if people have questions, but pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, the demand for housing at BART stations as people are not working in downtown San Francisco has changed dramatically. We do emphasize a form-based code, and Steve Price on the call is an expert in this, but our idea is that gradually things just move closer and closer to where they really support people wanting to be on San Pablo Avenue. It's gradual. And it's not going to be every property, but it's in any way that we can kind of move it to be supporting of that while still recognizing what business needs are and corporate needs are. As you can see, I think there's lots of nodes of activity, but that is our, the public works director when I got here called San Pablo Avenue when we were doing streetscape improvements, kind of like spreading the peanut butter thin. It's long, it's 3 miles. That's a long corridor. I often say if you concentrated everything that's in San Pablo Avenue on one smaller street, you'd be amazed with what this place was. But people, there's going to be gaps. Properties that don't turn over, properties that are held for one reason or another, and it's long. But so nodes of activity, and I think we can all see it happening at Stockton. You can see often right now, there's lots of businesses really thriving with people coming in all ways to them. I personally find myself up by Del Norte quite a bit. A lot of my favorite restaurants are up there, and there's only going to be more. And then, of course, downtown. The plaza area and the theater block really up to Stockton. I think one of the real characteristics you'll see when people are marketing the larger sites, they really focus on the highway and the average daily traffic. It's a huge piece of what drives the value on these properties. But as we also know, one of the really unique characteristics is that it also has incredible BART bus access and the Ohlone Greenway. And so increasingly focusing on, I used to say it kind of a park once strategy, but where, nodes of activity, but being able to get to these places in any way. And I think, and we'll see when we pull a later slide, we have a really unique collection of both large and small businesses. So national businesses that locate here, and obviously that picture before of all the food is a lot of small local business. Are these 4 pictures. Does everybody know these 4 and where they are? So here's just an example of a site being marketed right now. And actually, I don't know how well you can see it, but Aisa and I were looking at it today. So currently where Trevino's was, the little bottom left inset, which was there for how many years, Mark? Probably since the 50s, right? They sold the property to when the market was hot for housing. They did sell the property to somebody who was going to build housing. They entitled that other beautiful inset with 150 units and a ground floor commercial, really good architects. The market fell out. He has not been able to make that feasible. He tried to sell it for a few years so that it would be feasible. It's just not right now. And that goes back to my previous slide is we've got to have some flexibility to keep momentum and keep building a place where people do want to be. And luckily we have lots of properties that can do lots of different things. So currently it's being sold, and you can see this is kind of how they, how this broker, and this is a very well-known broker who does small coffee shops as well as big. You can see here, they're looking for something big. The person who bought the property obviously wants to get what they put into it back out of it, and that leans towards big. And so they do talk about it's a, you know, include shopping centers, variety of retail and commercial businesses, home to many national retailers. This is how often a broker looks at a larger site. Before the pandemic, they really were selling for housing. That was the highest value. And for the city, that would mean a lot, right? That's property tax turnover, the value of that assessed building. Anytime any of these older commercial properties turn over, obviously it improves the city's property tax. Housing was the highest use, but it's not the only. And it's, I think that Sharif is on here as well. Obviously, having a mixture is really what does make us resilient. And when we talk, my previous slide talked about being balanced and resilient. And when we meet, when I get into sales tax, we often hear that we're really stable. Not every place is stable right now. The sales tax consultants are often having to reforecast city budgets. And ours is pretty stable because of this mix. Similarly, down at the plaza, I do love, actually, I don't think they used to say this, but they do now say in their on their webpage, strategically located at the BART station on a major thoroughfare with a dense population. They didn't used to, I think, talk about the BART station. So that was the leasing agent's been there a long time. But that was just a fun thing to see. But you can see also, and you can go to their webpage, they have their brochure and has all this data. They look at level of education. Trader Joe's locates where there's very high education levels. That's just one of their things. So this is the kind of things that the larger places look at. And as we know, we have some larger properties. We have, for those that don't know, so there's very few vacancies at this moment. Barnes and Noble is actually, now we have a building permit in for Crunch Fitness. So Joann's is their large one, and they say they said that one's a little bit of a hard configuration, and otherwise just very small ones. I know that many people want the plaza to be, again, like a Healdsburg Square. And sometimes you'll hear people saying it's not successful. It's actually a very successful shopping center from a sales tax property use basis. So how do we make it be the things that we want? One, we frequent it. And, you know, host things, do things. We can talk more about it, but it is a successful center. But we also have a lot of small businesses on the app. They, as opposed to the shopping centers, really rely on curbside parking. Most of them don't have off-site parking. Increasingly, we're getting bike racks installed and have funding for that. I think we also have a really fun collection of small shopping centers, Peppermint Tree Plaza, Mosher Square, and some of those are really filling up with really interesting businesses. A key, I don't know how many property owners there are on the chamber or on this call, but key is what the property owners want to do with it. We have people wanting to be here, but it takes a real partnership with property owners and businesses. And I think each time we see a proactive property owner, we end up seeing good thriving businesses as well. So like I said, housing, kind of interesting. So the city had not built housing in a long time, 10 years ago. Aisa has a great slide where it's 40s and 50s, we grew. 60s through 2000, we really didn't build anything. And this is across the Bay Area, and part of what led to the housing shortage. Like I heard at that time, for every 1,000 jobs, 100 housing units were created. So that building housing was happening throughout. And we were seeing it, right? We were seeing disinvestment on the avenue. online shopping was growing like crazy, so people were not building new commercial centers. So we did shift to that housing model, and we did actually, I don't have my notes, I say you do, but I think we built about 500 and something units. So over 1,000 residents in the last 10 years, all living on San Pablo Avenue. And some of these are really interesting, right? Like the bottom right is Metro 510. So that was an empty parking lot at the plaza. You can see the middle one is Mayfair. That was an empty parking lot since Mayfair Grocery closed. Again, Mark, I'm going to go always to you for history, but 30 years ago, right? That generates now a lot of property tax, brings a lot of customers, and a lot of these, and then of course, Credence condos. It's very hard to get condos built these days, so we're really, really lucky to have gotten those and created new home ownership on the avenue. So all of these increased property tax values brought customers, and many of them are affordable housing, which I also hear from businesses is really important in order for workers to be able to have workers who can live near their staff, can find affordable places to live, and near a BART station where they can also get to the other job centers. So again, like I said, this was what was really happening 2017, 2018 in response to the specific plan. The market feasibility is really hard right now. Our new apartments are all between 95 and 100% occupied. So they're occupied, but the rents that they get compared to construction costs all over the Bay Area are having a really hard time. And so you'll see some of our properties that were entitled, like we talked about at Trevino's, are now shifting to become commercial again, which I think I actually think a mixture is always going to be a better urban fabric than doing everything all at once. And thank you to the chamber and all of you for all the ribbon cuttings that you've posted. It's really, it's been a lot, actually, and you'll see in the next slide, actually. So since about businesses turns hands, one of the things I like to say is, one of the things we struggle with is not a lot of built restaurants. We don't have any vacant restaurants ever. Solano Avenue, Berkeley has lots that you could just go plug in. We have somebody who has to build it. So it's a big investment. But once you do have a business built, and like I said, if it's a good property owner, they often, once a business is built, it becomes a new business. So while we see some closures, we've had way more openings than closures. So we've had 20 closures, more than 37, either openings or change of hands. And we'll get into, we're even building some new commercial. Some of these, from the budget standpoint, have been helpful. So I miss Big Five personally. I'm always out of something, tennis balls or something. But Harbor Freight obviously is an increase in sales tax over Big Five. Same thing right now, AutoZone is going to be making a lot more than CVS. So we've also been lucky with some of those shifts have actually been higher earning. And you can see it's a lot of specialty grocery stores, restaurants, some creative things, Anime Island, Color Zone just opened. So we can talk about any of these. We have 2,300 active business licenses. ISA runs the business license program. That's a lot. We're a town of 24,000 people. A lot of those are obviously contractors and offices. But we do have 270 brick and mortar fixed place, 28 restaurants, which is those that also serve alcohol, I believe. Otherwise, they're in a fixed place. I think ISA knows more about this. And then home occupations is kind of fun. And you can see, there's a lot of different people doing different things at home, and regulations have changed. Some of them are actually even cooking and selling things to restaurants now. So the home kitchen operations have changed. We're excited. It's very unusual to be able to fill a ground floor of a multifamily. A lot of places are not, but we really wanted on the north end to add some new commercial space. So all of those spaces have signed leases. They're first generation build out, so they're challenging, right? Meaning they don't have their plumbing. As Mark knows, we're trying to figure out waste management, how to do everything on these sites. But there is under construction, has already pulled the building permit, is a Yemeni coffee house, the Thai restaurant from Richmond that is moving to Mayfair, a Nepalese restaurant where she lives in Richmond, but owns 2 Nepalese restaurants in San Francisco. And then, as I mentioned, also Cerrito Police. So sales tax is holding. It's pretty consistent that you see this where we're slightly up. We're more up than the county and the state often for the past, I think I looked for the past like 8 quarters, and you can get these on the city's webpage. Sales tax data is not very shared by the state. It's proprietary. So we can't talk about specific sales tax, but you can see our top 25 producers. And I do want to give a shout out to Honda, they've been incredibly important. Really, our top is Honda, Ross and Marshalls, cannabis. Actually, so the top 25, you can see these are really important. And a huge part though is online shopping. Like I said, Ace and I, what did we see? You have the notes, but online shopping is up 658% and brick and mortar only 18% in the state. I'm a culprit. I don't know if you're all culprits, but I'm a culprit. I do a lot of online. What's really important about places like Honda, Ifshin Violins, right, is actually, they sell violins all over the world. But what's really important is the money that we spend locally helps actually determine a portion of what we get from the online pool. So again, Claire or HDL, our sales tax forecaster, could talk to you more about how that works, but the more point of sale money that we spend locally ends up influencing that larger online pool and how much the city gets. So super, super important. You can see again, mostly automotive, casual dining, quick service restaurants are actually doing better than they are statewide. Food and drug, fuel and service station, increased gas prices help and hurt. And the specialty stores, things like Ifshin. So I used to just pull this together today. It's quite impressive, actually. I think it's really easy just to look at like the pieces of property where nothing's happening. Like I said, over 3 miles, that's going to happen in a place that's in transformation. But this is a pretty incredible collection of small businesses and large businesses. So thank you to chamber members. Hopefully most of them are chamber members, and if not, they will be soon. And then here's just some of the things that we also work on. So we try to support home occupation and create activity on the avenue. Foot traffic on the avenue is really important. So we, with the chamber, sponsor the Flavor Fest, Makers Fairs, the workshops that we've been doing with the Small Business Development Center. We did just pass an outdoor dining and retail program. So you are seeing more activity in front of existing restaurants and bars, as well as on some of the vacant properties where we're getting flexible with food trucks until those properties are ready to be their next version. The city sponsors with funds that we get from the cannabis businesses, a core team, which helps with homelessness, which Aisa could talk more about, but any business who wants help, we are there to really try to create a first line of contact with unhoused people. Code enforcement, neighborhood preservation, always working on graffiti and keeping some of those properties that are vacant, hopefully on the upswing, not on the downswing. Complete streets and different pedestrian, bicycle, transit, and circulation improvements. And I think that is all I have.
Thank you, Melanie.
I didn't look to see how long. Yeah.
Yeah, let's open it. If everybody can hang on. I know it's running a little late, but if you can hang on, let's open it up again for questions. So you said, do we have any, or what do we have coming in through the chat?
Yeah, from Steve Price, the pandemic is long over, but development's still lagging. Why? Tariffs, interest rates, struggling young people. You want to shed any light on that?
Yeah, so I think so tariffs and construction costs just kept going up and up. For El Cerrito in particular, some of the cities that were making it very, very, very hard to develop, but are very desirable, like Berkeley and Palo Alto, because of the just pent up demand from the universities, were making development hard, and now they're forced to do it. So there's more money to be made there. They have more vacancies and more stalled projects, but some of the demand has shifted. A lot of our demand was driven by work from home. From downtown, right? So a lot of our demand was going to be to get people to downtown San Francisco. That's changed, as we all have heard. BART has huge ridership, but it is down from pre-pandemic. And then there are some saying that we were so successful in getting, so there's still, it's a hard problem because it takes a while to absorb. There were a lot of new units, right? And as we all see, there's not a lot of new jobs being created. So the demand has shifted as well. So I think it's a combination of factors. For us in particular, we have 4 projects trying very, very hard to get built. They've sunk so much money in, they've already submitted for building permit. And so it literally is money and feasibility. The cost of construction exceeds what they can get in returns at this time. So there's a gap. And I think the tail of the pandemic isn't over. The pandemic is long over, but I think the economics of it, businesses that we're holding on, so I think that we're still feeling there's still adjustments occurring, and what we were seeing was a pre-pandemic condition, right? The conditions have changed. And so that's why I talk a lot about flexibility and adaptability so that we can keep maintaining the vision, but also being flexible so we have momentum.
There's another question, which I think goes along the assessed value or the properties turning over. Would development along the corridor help with taxes that could be invested in San Pablo Avenue, or is Prop 13 a big deterrent?
Oh, actually, and I forgot to mention this, so thank you for that question. So we did just have, for example, 2 large properties sell. So Cerrito Vista, the apartments that were built at, across from Big Five, what street is that? Where Playland Not at the Beach was. That property just sold, and it's 97% occupied. Aisa, you might have the numbers what it sold for, but it's considered. So when we were first embarking on getting projects built, we didn't have any real estate comps, and so it was hard. How could people know what to invest in if they didn't know how well these would do? So the fact that it sold, and for the price that it sold at, people see as really promising. Going back to Steve's question, what I've heard is it's a really good indication that we can attract capital. It's a secure place to bring capital, but it still doesn't close the feasibility gap. So selling an already occupied property is very different than building a property, right? So those sunk costs were already there, but it's considered promising. Similarly, Del Norte Place just sold. That was big. Both of these brought big real property transfer taxes as well as reassessed values. So that all goes into the city's general fund and is a part of what is what stabilizes the budget. For example, if the BART projects get built, the market rate, BART properties are not taxed right now. If that market rate development comes, that's quite a bit of new taxes. Mayfair is quite a bit. And so, yes, in terms of Prop 13, not when they sell. So, I mean, there's different things that you don't get to see exactly what happens with taxes, but when the properties sell, so for example, Credence with, how many condos are there at Credence, Steve?
32.
Yeah, so that property prior to that was all Prop 13, right? What was it? It was the Guitar Center, and before that it was Safeway. But when that sold first to the developers. And so that was out of Prop, so that obviously Prop 13, it wasn't out of Prop 13, but it was reassessed. And then each of those condominiums then is assessed, and each time they sell, they do. So movement and investment is considered good. Does that answer? Whoever answered that?
Yeah, that was my question. So actually Prop 13, the effect of Prop 13 kind of diminishes over time unless the property changes, ownership. In which case it seems like a condominium building might be more immune to the effects of Prop 13 than an apartment building that's under one ownership.
Yeah, both. Either resetting from 1960 to 2026 is going to be a good thing, right? We'll deal with it again in 40 years. So, yeah, so that's what I meant by the fact that the property Cerrito Vista sold. That's considered a really promising market sign, right? You want to be attracting capital and investment. And yes, from a property tax standpoint, that also assists. Some of the properties have not reassessed. I mean, we all see it in the residential world as well, right? So the gaps are large.
Next question is from Kevin. Can you elaborate on online poll?
Oh yeah, so you might have to. So why am I forgetting? HDL is our sales tax. I can't think of what their name is, but they forecast for us, and it's very, very complicated how it all works. So some is allocated by where. It's why you're seeing people build more fulfillment centers now, because there's some laws that changed, and actually where it used to be where somebody buys something is where the taxes went mostly. Now it's where the fulfillment center is. And then there's some that just goes into this big pool because it's not distinguishable, and then it's allocated based on local sales. So it's super complicated. I don't know all the laws and changing laws around it, but if it's something that people would like, so I think there's splits. So like your business kept, so like Jenny K, right? So if you guys have an online customer and your customer lives here and buys online, it's different than if your customer doesn't live here and buys online. And how that's all allocated is not something, I could try to find it if it says in this newsletter. I'm going to look up a newsletter really quick, but I would encourage if you are interested in it, we could have somebody who's a specialist in this stuff. It's complicated and changing and large. So.
And then our last question, thanks, Melanie, is what are we going to do about those holding properties and not developing with those vacant properties on San Pablo Avenue? Obviously can be an eyesore in some instances. And then also a second part of this question, why additional taxes on businesses and residents with Prop C, which I know
Measure C.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Measure C is not one I'm going to be able to talk about, but the vacant properties, sometimes you'll hear people talk about vacant property taxes. Portland's in a big fight about it right now. They're, property owners are like, if the market was there, we'd like them not to be vacant. So overall, the city strategy has been the more one to do code enforcement, so they at least have to maintain it to a certain level. That takes some effort. But the other is, I think when we look at some of these properties, when the market is to continue making this place a safe place to invest, ideally, when that happens, the market's supposed to be rational, right? So if somebody can make enough money off of their property, they're going to sell it. Some of them have been, one of them, so McNevin has been vacant the whole time I've worked here, right? So I'm just gonna bring that one up because I think it's just an interesting one and it's got a lot of history, and it did, finally did sell. And it was gonna try to take advantage of this market, and it split, and it was gonna sell two ways. There's one developer is still actively sort of trying, another one, I don't know. Mark, yeah, if you want to say you're leaving or you want to say something. You're muted.
I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I have to leave. I just wanted to say thanks to everybody, and it's great seeing everyone.
Thanks. Yeah. Vacancies are different than vacant properties, right? And so vacant properties, actually, like I said, if it's a motivated landowner, motivated business owner, we find that those are getting occupied. A vacant property has interesting dynamics. Who owns it? What do they want for it? What are their tax exemptions that they're getting? Is somebody offering one of the things that other cities are dealing with? I think we might be as well. Like I just even described on one property. Property values went up so much a few years ago. Some people are going to keep that property, that value in mind, and they're not going to want to sell for less. And we don't know when it's going to hit that again, right? So there's all kinds of dynamics. And so I think what we've learned is we did see, once we did the specific plan, we saw some of those move, right? So we saw some things that were sitting vacant forever. Guitar Center was sitting vacant forever. Mayfair sat vacant forever. And so we did see some of those move. And so I think it's trying to make sure that you are creating the conditions that people want to invest in. And then some of them will move. Some of them are very sticky. One that's sticky is the south of another one that's sticky. So where Almona was, the button store, right? There was the mortuary or something. No realtor has been able to figure out what's going to motivate. People have made offers on that as long as I know. And they don't want to do anything. So, short of having eminent domain, which people don't, there's not a lot we can do, but keep making the market conditions, including safety, really good so that the market moves. That's the most, but that's an example of one that there's several that there's offers on all the time that hasn't hit where the seller is a willing seller.
All right. Well, those are all of our questions, Lisa. Thank you again to Paul and Melanie for sharing your time and insights with us today. And thank you everyone who joined and participated. As a reminder, the recording of today's conversation will be available on our YouTube channel if you want to revisit it and share it with others. These conversations are so important to keeping our business community informed and connected. I appreciate you being part of it, and we hope to see you at an upcoming chamber event soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.